I mistook him for a simple barista, never imagined he was my billionaire boss. Welcome back with a new real shock story. Before we start, comment and tell me which city you're watching from. At the end, don't forget to subscribe and rate it from 0 to 10. Let's enjoy the story, everyone.
I never imagined that an ordinary morning could turn into the kind of day I'd never forget. I remember waking up to the sound of my alarm buzzing insistently, the sunlight barely cutting through my curtains. I rolled over, groaning, my mind still half in dreams, thinking about the coffee I needed to get me through the day. I had no idea that the coffee shop I always rushed past, the one with the little bell that jingled whenever someone walked in, would be the place where everything would start to change. I thought I was just going in for my usual latte, like any other Tuesday, but the moment I walked in, something felt different. There was a tension in the air, though I couldn't figure out why. The kind of tension that makes your stomach twist in ways you can't explain. That the bell above the door jingled as I stepped inside, and I barely looked up, expecting the usual barista who always greeted me with a tired smile. But instead, I saw him, just standing there, behind the counter, wiping down the espresso machine like it was nothing, completely calm, completely ordinary. At first, I didn't think much of it. He seemed quiet, almost shy, and he smiled at me when our eyes met. I thought he was just another new barista, someone who probably just started and didn't know the routine yet. There was something about the way he looked, though, like he was noticing everything, and yet he wasn't trying too hard. It made me uneasy, in a way I couldn't explain. I stepped up to the counter, fumbling with my wallet, and tried to focus on ordering without staring. I don't know why, but I found myself stealing glances at him. His hands were steady, his movements precise. I expected the usual clumsy gestures of someone new, but there was a kind of confidence about him that didn't match the barista look at all. He handed me my coffee, our fingers brushing slightly. A tiny spark went off, and I instantly felt guilty for noticing it, but I couldn't stop. I smiled awkwardly, mumbling a thank you, and quickly turned away. I thought it was over. I thought that was all there was to it. But then, as I was walking out, he spoke my name, just my first name, Alec. It was so calm, so certain, that it sent a shiver down my spine. I froze, my hands still on the door, and turned slowly. He was watching me, just watching, like he had been expecting me. I nodded, a little confused, and he smiled again. Something about that smile felt knowing, like he knew more about me than I did myself. I shook my head, trying to laugh it off silently, telling myself I was imagining things. It's impossible, right? How could a stranger, a barista I'd never met, know my name? That day, I couldn't shake it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him standing there, calm and composed, almost untouchable, and it terrified me. I kept thinking about the way he moved, the way he spoke. It wasn't like anyone else I'd ever met, but I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was nothing, just a coffee shop encounter, nothing more. I even laughed about it with my friend later, pretending it didn't bother me. But inside, I knew something was off. Something about him wasn't normal. The next morning, I found myself walking the same route again, almost without thinking. Part of me was scared to go back, and part of me, I couldn't even admit it to myself, but part of me wanted to see him again. My heart raced as I approached the shop, my steps slowing without me realizing it. And there he was, standing behind the counter, exactly like yesterday, wiping the espresso machine. Our eyes met again, and I felt the same strange electricity, the same mix of fear and fascination. It was like he had been waiting. I told myself to act normal, to order my coffee and leave. But when I got to the counter, my voice caught. I don't know why. He handed me my drink with that same calm, steady smile, and then he said something I'll never forget. "You didn't think I'd forget you, did you?" My stomach dropped. I laughed nervously, trying to play it off, but he didn't laugh. His eyes were serious, piercing, and in that moment, I realized that this was no ordinary encounter. He knew more about me than I expected, and I had no idea why. All that day, I kept replaying it in my head. Every small gesture, every glance, every word, it was consuming me. I couldn't focus at work. I couldn't focus on anything. My mind kept circling back to him. And then, as if the universe decided to throw me into chaos, the next week at work, I ran into him again, but this time, it wasn't a coffee shop encounter. It was in a meeting I wasn't even supposed to attend. And suddenly, the casual, quiet barista from my neighborhood was standing at the head of the table. A nameplate in front of him read, "Mr. Alexander Rose, CEO." My mind stopped. My heart skipped. I felt the floor shift beneath me. I stared, unable to speak. Could it be him? The same calm, precise man behind the coffee counter. My mind screamed it was impossible. He had seemed so ordinary, so simple, so human in the coffee shop. But here he was, commanding the room, every eye on him. And suddenly everything I thought I knew about him, about the world, about luck and chance, shattered. I don't know how long I stood there. My chest was tight, my palms sweaty. He looked at me, just once, and gave a small, almost knowing smile, like he was letting me in on a secret I wasn't ready for. And in that moment, I realized that my ordinary life, the one I had been living comfortably, was about to be turned upside down. The world I had known was gone. And I was standing on the edge of something I didn't understand but couldn't look away from. It was terrifying. And yet, there was a strange pull, a strange excitement, and I knew, deep down, that nothing would ever be the same again. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, staring at him, my mind racing 1,000,000 miles an hour. Alexander Rose, the man I had thought was just a quiet, ordinary barista, was sitting at the head of the conference table, calm, composed, and completely in control. Every word he spoke carried authority. Every gesture demanded attention. And there I was, frozen in place, feeling completely exposed, like someone had pulled the rug out from under my entire life. How could this be? How could the man behind the coffee counter, the one who had smiled at me so gently just a few days ago, be the same person now commanding an entire room? I tried to focus on the papers in front of me, pretending I belonged, pretending I had a reason to be there. My hands were shaking so badly, I thought I might drop my notebook. My heart pounded like a drum, and I kept stealing glances at him. He hadn't noticed me yet, or maybe he had, and he was just letting me stew in my own confusion. The air in the room felt heavier, thicker, and I could feel my stomach twisting with a mix of fear, curiosity, and something else I couldn't name. Minutes passed, or maybe hours, I couldn't tell. Every word he spoke, every motion he made, kept me trapped in a sort of daze. And then, it happened. He looked directly at me, just for a moment, and that small, knowing smile appeared again. My breath caught in my throat. It was like he was silently saying, "I know you've noticed me. I know what you're thinking." I wanted to look away, to hide, to pretend I wasn't mesmerized, but I couldn't. There was something magnetic about him, something dangerous, something irresistible. After the meeting, I found myself following him down the hall without even realizing it. My mind screamed at me to stop, to turn around, to go back to my office and pretend this had never happened. But my legs moved on their own, carrying me closer, closer to the man I had only just discovered was living a life so far beyond anything I could imagine. When he reached the elevator, he pressed the button, turned to me, and said, "Alec, I assume you have questions." His voice was calm, even gentle, but there was an edge to it that made my heart race. I opened my mouth, trying to speak, but no words came out. All I could do was nod. He smiled again, that same small, knowing smile, and then stepped into the elevator. I followed, feeling like I was stepping into a world I wasn't prepared for. The doors closed, and suddenly it was just the two of us, the hum of the elevator filling the silence between us. I wanted to ask him how it was possible, how someone could be both so ordinary and so extraordinary, but my voice wouldn't cooperate. Finally, he spoke, and when he did, it was like the sound of his voice broke through the fog in my mind. "You're surprised, aren't you?" he said. I swallowed hard, nodding again, because yes, I was more than I had ever been in my entire life. He chuckled softly, but it wasn't a laugh, more like a quiet acknowledgement of my shock. "I don't blame you," he said. "Most people don't realize who I am until it's too late. But you noticed something different from the start." I blinked, confused. "Different?" I managed to whisper. My hands were still shaking, and I felt like my chest might explode. "Yes," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "There's a difference between seeing someone and really noticing them. Most people never do. You did." His words made my heart skip a beat, and I felt a strange warmth spread through me, even as my mind continued to reel. I didn't know what to say, what to think, what to feel. All I could do was stand there, captivated and terrified at the same time. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus on anything. Every time I tried to work, my mind drifted back to him, back to the barista with the calm smile, back to the CEO commanding the room with effortless authority. I kept replaying every detail of our encounters, wondering what it all meant, wondering why he had taken notice of me, and most of all, wondering what he wanted from me. That evening, as I walked home, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life had already begun to change in ways I didn't understand. The streets felt different, almost charged, like something was waiting for me just around the corner. I kept thinking about the elevator, about the way he looked at me, and I realized with a shiver that nothing would ever be the same. I had stumbled into a world I didn't belong to, or, at least, I didn't think I didn't. Somehow, I had caught the attention of someone who could change everything. The next few days were a blur of stolen glances and accidental encounters. I kept seeing him in places I didn't expect: the lobby, the cafeteria, even in the hallways where I thought I'd never cross paths with him again. Each time, the same calm, composed smile, the same piercing look. And each time, my heart jumped, my stomach twisted, and my mind raced. I felt drawn to him in ways I couldn't explain. But there was also fear. Fear of what this meant. Fear of what might happen. And fear of what I might do if I let myself get too close. Then, one afternoon, everything changed again. I had stayed late at work, trying to finish a project, when I heard a soft knock on the office door. I looked up, and there he was, standing just outside, holding a folder in his hands. He didn't smile this time. His expression was serious, almost urgent. "Alec," he said, stepping in without waiting for an invitation. "I need you to see this." My heart pounded in my chest as he handed me the folder. Inside were documents, reports, and photographs, evidence of something I couldn't yet understand. I flipped through them, my hands trembling, and the more I read, the more my stomach churned. This was bigger than anything I could have imagined. Bigger than just a random CEO noticing me in a coffee shop. There were secrets, power, and danger tangled up in ways that made my head spin. And in that moment, I realized I had been pulled into a story far beyond my control. A story that would change me forever. I looked up at him, panic and awe mixing in my chest, and he said softly, "This is why you were meant to notice me, Alec. This is why our paths crossed." My mind was spinning. I wanted to ask questions, to run away, to pretend none of this was happening, but I couldn't. Something inside me had shifted, and I knew I was in too deep. And just like that, my ordinary life had vanished. I was no longer the girl who went to the coffee shop for a latte. I was a girl caught in something extraordinary, something terrifying, and something I couldn't walk away from. And the worst part, I had no idea what would happen next. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind kept racing, replaying every detail of the folder, every word Alexander had spoken, and every glance he'd given me since that first morning at the coffee shop. I kept thinking about the way his eyes seemed to see right through me, like he could read my thoughts before I even formed them. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things, that it was all coincidence, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Something was happening, something I didn't understand, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into a world I wasn't ready for. The next day at work, I couldn't focus. Every email, every meeting, every conversation blurred together in a haze of anxiety and anticipation. I kept seeing him everywhere I looked, his presence looming like a shadow I couldn't escape. And then, at lunch, it happened again. He appeared in the cafeteria, casually leaning against the counter as if he belonged there, watching. I froze. My stomach knotted, my palms grew sweaty, and my heart raced faster than I thought possible. I wanted to look away, to hide, but I couldn't. He had this way of holding your attention without even trying, like a force of gravity pulling you in. He didn't speak to me at first. He just watched, his expression unreadable. I could feel him studying me, measuring me, and I realized with a shiver that he knew more about me than I knew about myself. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm but commanding. "Alec, meet me in my office after lunch." Just like that, no explanation, no hesitation. My mind spun with questions, but I nodded, knowing there was no way to refuse. The minutes crawled by until lunch ended, and I found myself walking down the long hallway to his office, each step heavier than the last. My heart pounded, my legs felt like they were made of lead, and every nerve in my body screamed at me to turn back, but I couldn't. Something inside me, curiosity, fear, something I couldn't name, pushed me forward. When I knocked on his door, it opened immediately, and there he was, standing like he'd been waiting for me, calm and composed as ever. Inside his office, the room was immaculate, sterile, and intimidating. Walls lined with books and awards, a massive desk dominating the center. He gestured for me to sit, and I obeyed, my mind spinning faster than ever. He didn't say anything at first, just watched me, and I felt like I was under a microscope. I wanted to ask him why, to demand answers, but the words died in my throat. Finally, he spoke. "There's something you need to understand, Alec," he said quietly, but with an edge that made my stomach twist. "The life you've been living, the one you think is ordinary, it's not as ordinary as you believe. You've been part of something much bigger, even if you didn't know it. And now, you're involved. You can't turn back." I blinked, confused and terrified. "Involved? What do you mean?" "I don't understand." My voice was trembling, but I couldn't help it. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to run, but something kept me rooted to the spot. He leaned back, studying me. "You noticed things others overlook. You paid attention. That's why you were chosen. Or, perhaps it's fate. I don't know which, but now you're here, and you'll see what I see." For hours, he explained, not everything, but enough to make my head spin. There were secrets, power struggles, and injustices hidden behind the walls of the company, things I had never imagined, documents, photos, emails, evidence of lies, betrayals, and manipulation at levels I couldn't comprehend. And somehow, I was now part of it. I wasn't just a bystander anymore. I was involved, whether I wanted to be or not. I felt dizzy. The room seemed to spin as he spoke, and with each word, I realized just how dangerous and complicated this world was. But there was something else too, a strange thrill, a rush I couldn't explain. Even though fear clawed at my chest, excitement surged through me. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years, and it terrified me almost as much as the danger. Days turned into a blur. I found myself pulled into meetings, private briefings, and unexpected encounters I wasn't prepared for. Alexander never forced me, never threatened me, but I felt a responsibility, a pressure I couldn't ignore. It was like stepping into a river that carried me forward, faster and faster, whether I wanted to swim or not. Every decision, every glance, every move mattered, and every time I saw him, calm and unreadable, I was reminded that nothing would ever be the same. There were moments that left me breathless. A file left on my desk with a message only I could understand. A hallway encounter where his eyes lingered just long enough to unsettle me. An email that hinted at a betrayal I couldn't yet piece together. And through it all, a voice inside me whispered, "This is dangerous. This is real. This is your life now." One evening, I stayed late again, poring over documents that revealed injustices and corruption I could barely comprehend. My head ached. My eyes burned, but I couldn't stop. I had to understand. And then, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, familiar. My heart stopped. I knew it was him. Alexander stepped into the room, quiet, almost ghost-like. "You're pushing yourself too hard," he said softly. But there was something in his tone, a weight, a concern that made me shiver. I looked up at him, exhausted and overwhelmed. I can't just ignore it," I whispered. "I have to know what's happening. I have to see the truth." He nodded slowly, as if he understood more than I could say. "And you will," he said. "But you have to be careful. Once you see everything, there's no turning back, no pretending anymore. You're part of this now, Alec, and you're stronger than you think. But even strength can be dangerous if you're not ready." I swallowed hard, my chest tight, knowing he was right. I didn't feel strong. I felt small, overwhelmed, terrified, and yet, I couldn't look away. I couldn't turn back. Something inside me had shifted, something I couldn't ignore. I was caught in a story bigger than myself, and it was only just beginning. As he left the room, I slumped back in my chair, exhausted, my mind a whirlwind of fear, curiosity, and something I refused to name. I realized that I had stepped into a life I didn't understand, into a web of secrets and power that I couldn't escape. And yet, deep down, I knew that facing it was the only way forward. And in that quiet moment, alone with my thoughts, I whispered to myself, "I don't know what's coming next, but I have to be ready." I couldn't stop thinking about what Alexander had said, the warning, the secrets, the power I was now tangled in. It was like the world I had known had collapsed overnight, leaving me standing on the edge of something I didn't fully understand. That night, I barely slept. My mind raced with images of the documents, the emails, the photographs, and most of all, him, AlexanderRose.com, composed, unshakable, and somehow terrifying. The next day, I found myself standing outside his office, my hands clammy, heart pounding like a drum. I didn't know what I was going to say or ask. All I knew was that I had to see him, had to understand more, had to confront the reality I had stumbled into. I knocked softly, and the door opened before I could even wait for a response.
There he was, standing like he had been expecting me, the calm in his eyes giving nothing away. "You're here," he said, almost more as a statement than a question. "Good." He gestured for me to follow him, and I did, my legs trembling beneath me. We walked down a quiet hallway, silent except for the echo of our footsteps. My stomach twisted with a mix of fear and anticipation. I had no idea what awaited me, but every instinct in my body screamed that whatever it was, it would change everything. He led me to a small windowless room, a single desk, a few chairs, and a folder lying open in the center. I could see photographs, papers, and handwritten notes inside. The air was thick with tension. "This," he said quietly, almost reverently, "is what you needed to see." He gestured toward the folder. Every secret, every betrayal, every injustice. And it's all connected. You're a part of this now, Alec, whether you like it or not. I took a deep breath and approached the desk. My hands shook as I picked up the first photograph. Faces of people I didn't know, places I didn't recognize, documents that revealed lies so deep I felt my stomach drop. And then I saw it. A name, a place, a connection that tied everything together. The realization hit me like a punch to the chest. I had been walking in a world of deceit without knowing it, and now I was standing right in the middle of it. Alexander watched me, his expression unreadable. "Do you understand now?" he asked softly. I nodded, though my voice failed me. The weight of what I had just discovered pressed down on me like a physical force. My mind raced with questions. How could this be real? How could this be happening? And why had I been chosen to see it all? Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. My heart leapt into my throat. Alexander's eyes darkened slightly, a flash of something I couldn't name crossing his face. He motioned for me to stay quiet. The door opened, and a man stepped in. I didn't recognize him, but the tension in the room made me want to shrink back. Alexander stood, placing himself slightly in front of me. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly, but there was no anger, just a warning. The man said nothing, just stared. And in that moment, I understood that everything I had seen, everything I had learned, was dangerous. This was no longer about curiosity or understanding. This was life and death, power and betrayal, and I was right in the middle of it. The man left without a word, but the air didn't lighten. My chest was tight, my hands clammy, and I felt more exposed than I ever had. Alexander turned to me, his eyes softening slightly, but the intensity remained. "This is the moment," he said. "The turning point. You see the truth now, Alec, and you have a choice. Step back into the world you knew, or step forward into the reality you've discovered. But once you step forward, there's no going back." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I wanted to run, to escape, to pretend none of this had ever happened. But a strange, undeniable pull kept me rooted. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't turn away. The truth was laid bare before me, terrifying and undeniable, and for the first time, I felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. Hours passed as Alexander guided me through the documents, explaining connections, revealing betrayals, and showing me the stakes of every choice, every move, every hidden truth. My head spun, my heart raced, and yet, through it all, I felt a clarity I had never known. This was real. This was dangerous. And I couldn't walk away, not now, not ever. At some point, I realized I was shaking. The fear, the adrenaline, the intensity of the moment had consumed me completely. Alexander noticed and stepped closer, placing a hand lightly on my shoulder. "You're stronger than you think, Alec," he said quietly. "But even strength can be tested, and today your strength will be tested more than ever." My mind raced. What did he mean? What would happen next? And then it hit me. This wasn't just about the secrets, the documents, or even him. This was about me. My choices, my courage, my ability to face a world that was far larger and darker than I had ever imagined. And in that realization, a wave of fear and exhilaration crashed over me simultaneously. I looked at him, searching for answers in his calm, composed eyes. He gave me the faintest nod, almost imperceptible, and I understood. The next step, whatever it was, would change everything. The world I had known was gone. My ordinary life, my simple routines, my sense of safety, all of it had vanished. And in its place stood a new reality, raw, unpredictable, and terrifying. And then, in a moment that would haunt me forever, he leaned in slightly, his voice a whisper, but sharp as a knife. "Are you ready, Alec? Because once we move forward, there's no turning back. Not for you, not for anyone." My breath caught in my throat. I nodded. Though my heart was hammering so violently, I thought it might burst. The air seemed to thicken around us, charged with tension, fear, and something I couldn't name. And in that moment, I realized with absolute clarity that my life had just reached its most dangerous, most intense, most life-altering point. Everything I had thought I knew, about him, about myself, about the world, was gone. And there was no way to go back. I never imagined that the next steps I took would feel so heavy, so uncertain, yet so inevitable. After that moment in Alexander's office, the world seemed different, as if the ordinary life I had once known belonged to someone else entirely. The documents, the secrets, the betrayals, they weren't just stories on paper anymore. They were real, and somehow I was a part of them, caught in a reality I couldn't escape. For days, I moved carefully, quietly, through the halls of the company, carrying the weight of everything I had learned. Every decision felt monumental. Every glance, every word, every choice seemed loaded with meaning I could barely comprehend. Alexander was there, calm and unwavering, always watching, always guiding. And though he never forced me, I could feel the pressure of his expectations, the gravity of being chosen to see and act upon truths most people would never encounter in their lifetimes. I remember one evening in particular. The office was quiet, the hum of lights filling the space as I sifted through the last set of files I had been given. My hands shook, my eyes burned, but I couldn't stop. I had to understand. I had to see the full picture. And as I worked, Alexander appeared in the doorway, his silhouette calm, almost serene, and yet there was something in his gaze that made my chest tighten. "You've done well, Alec," he said softly. "Better than I expected." His words made my stomach flutter in ways I hadn't anticipated. But there was more, a seriousness beneath the compliment, a weight that reminded me that this was still dangerous, still real. I looked up at him, And in that moment, I realized I was no longer just the girl who had walked into a coffee shop. I was someone who had seen the hidden layers of a world most people ignored, and that knowledge had changed me forever. We sat together in silence for a while. I could feel the tension in the room, the unspoken understanding between us. And yet, despite the fear, despite the danger, there was a strange sense of relief. For the first time since all of this began, I felt like I could breathe. I had seen the truth. I had faced it. And though the consequences were still unclear, I knew that I had survived the first and hardest part of the journey. Over the next few days, life slowly began to settle into a new rhythm. I was still part of Alexander's whir. LD, still aware of the dangers and the stakes, but I had grown stronger. I had learned to trust my instincts, to pay attention to the signs, and to understand that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. Every challenge, every hidden truth, every tense encounter had taught me something I could never unlearn. One afternoon, as I walked through the quiet hallways, I reflected on everything that had happened. The girl I had been, the one who worried about coffee, missed buses, and ordinary routines, was gone. In her place was someone who had seen the darker corners of life, someone who had been tested and had endured. And though I was still scared, still uncertain about the future, I also felt a strange sense of empowerment. I had faced the unimaginable and survived. Alexander approached me quietly, his presence calm and reassuring. "You've come a long way, Alec," he said, "and you'll go further. But remember this, the world you've discovered is harsh, unfair, and often cruel. Never forget the lessons you've learned here." His words resonated deeply, echoing the fear, the courage, and the strength I had gained. I nodded, understanding fully that the journey was far from over, but that I was no longer helpless. That evening, I walked home slowly, the city lights flickering around me. I thought about everything I had experienced, everything I had learned. And I realized something important. Life isn't about what happens to you. It's about how you respond. It's about courage, about standing up when the world seems to conspire against you, about facing fear and uncertainty with your eyes wide open. I had faced my fears, and though they were far from gone, I had grown stronger because of them. I thought about the people in the photographs, the injustices I had uncovered, the secrets that had been hidden from the world, and I understood that my story was just one of many. There were countless others facing fear, betrayal, and challenges I could barely imagine. And yet, somehow, knowing that I had survived, knowing that I had endured, gave me hope. Hope that courage could ripple out, hope that awareness could change things, hope that even in the darkest circumstances, resilience could shine through. As I reached my apartment, I paused and looked at the night sky. The stars seemed distant, yet impossibly bright. I whispered to myself, almost as if speaking into the universe, "I don't know what comes next, but I know I'll face it. I'll face it with everything I've got." And in that moment, I realized that this story, my story, wasn't just about fear, danger, or secrets. It was about strength, resilience, and the power of noticing what others overlook. Alexander had changed my life. The world he had shown me was daunting, terrifying, and often unfair. But it had also made me aware of my own strength, my ability to survive, and my capacity to act even when the stakes were impossibly high. And though the path ahead was uncertain, I knew one thing for sure. I would never go back to the girl I had been. She belonged to another life, another world, one that had been left behind the moment I walked into that coffee shop and noticed him. And now, sitting alone, reflecting on everything, I had to ask myself, and perhaps ask the world, one question. How many more times will courage be tested before people choose to see, to notice, and to act? How many more secrets, injustices, and hidden truths wait in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover them? I didn't have the answers, but I knew I couldn't turn away. I couldn't pretend it wasn't happening. Because once you see the truth, Alec, you can never unsee it. And so, here I am, Alec Rose, no longer the girl who thought life was ordinary. I've walked through fear, faced the unimaginable, and survived. And though the journey's key continues, I know this. Courage isn't about knowing you won't be afraid. It's about moving forward, even when every part of you screams to run.